Can I ask you a question?
The Bolton effect.
Hello, Bridge.
Hello, Louis.
How are you, my darling?
Good. How are you today?
How do you like our new fancy office
loving
table,
it.
desk podcast table?
Loving it.
Eh?
Yeah. We haven't been hard about this for a while. It's a nice piece of furniture. And actually, Louis, it's really good for the topic that we're going to discuss today. Let's talk about sandwiches.
Yeah, it is lunchtime. I'm kind of hungry. So, yes, what can I have? PB&J, ham and cheese and tomato.
I remember one of the testimonials that you got was Louis runs on the sniff of a PB&J. I'm like, that's so true.
The secret ingredient there is the sourdough.
Correct, indeed.
That's the sourdough, that's the secret ingredient. Okay, sandwiches. What are you talking about, Bridge?
So I'm actually not talking about sourdough sandwiches or any kind. What I'm talking about is a generational thing. We're kind of the meat in the sandwich. So we're working up towards our parents and we're working down for our child. So we're the kind of in-between generation. We have parents that we feel responsible for, and we have a child that we feel responsible for. And you and I are not unique in this. It's a generational thing. You know, when you have aging parents and you have children who are growing older.
I've never thought about it like that. So you've kind of...
Did I take you by surprise?
You definitely take me by surprise. So if I hear you right, you're talking about where we are in terms of our life stage.
Yes.
Fortunate enough to still have parents alive, but aging. And then obviously being the parents to now miss 14.
Yeah, so...
Please, enlighten me.
There are so many things that we take into account when we consider that. You know, if we think about both of our parents, we're in New Zealand, your folks are in South Africa, my mum's in England, and we have a responsibility to both of them.
This has been a topic
of great anxiety and consternation for you, I know, because
it's been a heavy topic.
Yeah, I know that you feel like you're not taking care of your parents properly.
Well, it's I mean, I don't even know where to start, but I suppose I can just start by talking about it. The fact that when I left South Africa 6 years ago, I wasn't sure when I was going to go back and see my folks. Just for some context, my folks are now in their 80s. And I said to them that I would be back once I've got permanent residency. That was the goal that I'd set myself before I'd made any decision to go back to South Africa. In between, so that was 2018. In between that, we've had obviously COVID and life and everything like that. So when you heard the stories about folks and people around the world that couldn't get to their loved ones, you have no idea what that meant for you and me. We couldn't travel because we weren't even on the right visas. And here where we were in New Zealand and they managed it as they managed it, there was a thing called quarantine, which we had to get a specific piece of paper for to book your quarantine before you could fly in and out. So it wasn't even an option for us to go. That being said, we're now in 2025 and it's been a long time. And yes, it's fraught with all sorts of emotional stuff, you know. And as a male and the firstborn, I have a younger sibling who's in England. It's been a yeah, I don't even know the words. I mean, you've walked this journey with me and I've walked this journey with your mom. But it's tough. I'm not going to lie. I think the overwhelming thing is the guilt.
I was just going to say that seems to be a very common theme of guilt, that we're not doing enough for our parents. And like I said earlier on, this is not something that is unique to you and I. I think this is something that happens for people around the world. There's guilt that you don't do enough for your parents. There's guilt that you do too little for your own offspring and don't pay that forward, you know, going up the chain.
But you know what? You don't think about this when you're younger, Bridge.
Oh, you definitely don't.
I don't think about it.
No.
I mean, you and I have been together for a while now, and yes, we've got a child. When we first met, we knew about retirement and we knew about getting old, and we obviously were, you know, aware of where our folks were.
Yeah.
But everything was pretty settled and everything was okay. So we never really gave it any credence or any matter of thought other than we knew that we were going to get older. If I can ask you a question, when do you think or what has been the change that has led you to think a little bit more seriously about your own mortality or aging or getting on, however you want to phrase it, as opposed to a couple of years ago where it wasn't necessarily at the forefront of your mind, where now it really, really is?
I don't know that my mortality is at the forefront of my mind. My mother's mortality is at the forefront of my mind. And so I wish I could do more, and I wish I was more present in her life, and I wish I could be around, because there's hospital visits and there's doctor's visits. And I just think she did such a great job with my grandparents. She was there and she was really up to speed with what procedures my grandmother had done, when she had them done. And I feel like my brain is so full, I sometimes feel like I don't have enough space for all of that information. And my mum, bless her, gave me some feedback the other day, and she said, I need to stop micromanaging her. And I don't think that could have been easy for her to say.
Can you give us a bit more context? Because just for the viewers out there and for the listeners, your mum is in England. You're here. That's a long distance away to have a relationship of any sort. You're in contact with your mom pretty much every other day. You have a very good relationship with your mom. So there's 2 parts to my question. The first one is, you mentioned earlier that your mom looked after your grandmother. So I'd love to unpack that and see what that looked like versus the fact that now your mom is on a different continent and what that looks like for you based on the fact of what you saw and heard growing up and seeing your grandmother and your mom, and then now in the situation of like facing the possibilities of the future with your mom. Does that make sense?
So I guess there's the changing parent-child dynamics. Our parents are much more vulnerable now as they age. And that's completely natural. There are other things, and it's an evolutionary thing. I'm not a scientist, but I can see the evolution of and the progression of age as it sets in. There's slightly less mobility, there are challenges with remembering things, and we're not talking about senility, and we're really not talking about any of the really debilitating things that happen to parents, but there's that changing relationship that says that I wish that I could take care of a little bit more.
Yeah, I find that having a conversation with my parents being so far away, and I love them to bits, don't get me wrong, I mean, but I try and keep the conversations light.
I think your parents are in a situation in South Africa that sometimes may feel for them that life is not light. I think
the
there are a lot
conversations have to be.
Yes, which is why you keep it there. Whether that's what your mother needs from you is a different story. Maybe she does just need to hear, shit, Mom, I'm really sorry about that. You can't force and inject this positivity.
I do. I mean, let's not,
But do you have to? We'll park that thought. That looks like it's a challenging one. So you're going to see your parents quite soon. You're taking Miss 14 with her. With you. You're going to South Africa for a couple of weeks, and you're going to fit in quite a lot of admin with your folks. But I mean that in the broader sense.
Yeah.
There's some power of attorney stuff that needs to be sorted out, and potentially this should have been done a long time ago, but I understand that your situation has been unique in that those kinds of conversations were not on the table with your parents a little while ago.
I think you and I both agree that, and it goes back to the question I had earlier, is like, do you find that there's been like a ramp up of responsibility for our parents all of a sudden? Like there's a quickening almost because of...
But you're getting older and they're getting older,
yeah,
so it's obvious.
But it's taken me quite by surprise. Having said that, I have tried to have discussions with my folks before I even immigrated to try and get to try and get their affairs in order so that I knew what was going on or what the rough plan would be for their old age and retirement, etc., etc. So yes, I am going back, and the word I think I use is cautiously optimistic, but apprehensive at the same time, because I have to have some difficult conversations. I don't have a lot of time there, and there's a lot that needs to happen while I'm in person.
And this goes back to being the sandwich, because you've got Kenzie with you, and there are some needs that need to be met there. You've got your parents who you're going to see, and there are needs to be met there. So you're definitely going to be walking a bit of a tightrope.
Definitely, because I mean, just the fact that my parents, bless them, are not technologically sound. They're
not technologically advanced.
So there's not even Wi-Fi in the house. So they rely on just literally airtime, or that's all. They don't even have a router and stuff like that because they just have never got round to it. And I haven't been there to kind of show them the way. It's going to be very interesting to kind of have that conversation. And as you say, having my daughter there who
has an agenda of her own
and doesn't necessarily have a relationship with her grandparents. Yes, she talks to them every now and again.
But you see, that's another aspect of long distance loving. A lot of people who are in our situation and who haven't brought their parents on the immigration journey with them have this enormous amount of space between the grandchildren and the grandparents.
Yeah, and
so Kenzie needs to make friends with that concept, and
Correct.
she needs to remember that she's got to be very, very patient with them.
Yeah, and me.
Well,
and me.
Yeah, good luck with that.
Thanks, Bridge. And as you rightly say, I mean, you're talking about a generational shift here, where you've got to navigate it like a sandwich, like you absolutely say. An older generation, my father, for example, doesn't really talk about things openly. He comes from that generation where it wasn't spoken about anything. So to try to elicit that information out of him is going to be something that I need to step up to and navigate and have an open conversation with him and get into rapport and find common ground and get to an outcome.
And I think one has to do that in a very, and once again, I don't say this as an expert, and that's why I keep framing it with, I think, that with your folks and with a lot of our parents, it's getting into rapport, as you say, and it's framing it in a way that makes them still feel that they're empowered and not being preached to. Because I think that would be very difficult for them to perceive, that they've now got the child who's coming up and who's making demands and saying, you don't understand, and why can't we just get this done, and all you have to do is sign it. And it's actually really not that easy for them. Also because of the typical kind of generation that bred parents, fathers like yours.
Yeah,
I think our mothers are a lot easier to talk to. They converse. They're a lot more open. But for the men, it very definitely is. I'm a closed book. I will handle the affairs in this family. I will handle the finances.
Yeah, and I mean, my dad. I mean, obviously him. So you have a take on him. And look, he's been a rock. I mean, I love him to bits, and I know he loves me deep down. He just doesn't necessarily have the wherewithal to actually express that. I
don't think there's a challenge with how your dad expresses his love. I think the biggest challenge that you face right now is understanding his affairs, and that is where he doesn't know what to or how to express.
Yeah, so that just comes back to fear and worry.
Whose fear?
My fear, because it goes back to that guilt. No, they say guilt is a useless emotion, but it's a very real thing where I've tried to have these conversations, but there's been no sort of plan.
Yeah. So what about asking for help? Is there somebody that you can engage? I mean, so where does help come in? So
that is a thank you for steering it back to that. So my plan has always been, I mean, obviously we discuss a hell of a lot. So my plan is to obviously, with my brother and we have been coaxing them and guiding my mum and dad to get their affairs in order, just to find out what is actually happening. And there is a document that I actually found quite by chance through my research on the internet called the Purple Book.
Is that something that we can share in the footnotes?
I'm sure it is, yeah. I can find it and definitely put it there. And it's basically just a document that lists a massive checklist, but it's done in a way that's quite elegant. And it's stuff that I didn't even think about, like little things like passwords for their phone, where they've put the key to the lock to their trunk, because that's how they operate, telephone numbers, people's contact numbers,
subscriptions that they may have. Because when a parent dies, you're in so much turmoil and in such shock, feeling so much grief. I guess that if you've got a checklist to go through and go, right, okay, Dad had this subscription, this is what I need to do. Exactly. This is the person I need to do to execute this, etc., etc. So that's what this purple file.
So this purple file just goes through every single thing that you don't, and it's broken up into different sections. So it's the personal section, it's the financial section, it's their friends section, and it's a working document. And it, you can put it in a binder and then put it in a place. And it also talks about their end of life plan, which for anybody is not something that you want to necessarily contemplate, but a lot of us have to.
Well, we have to, we have to, and yes, it is daunting. And something that my mom brought to my awareness is that she actually has a plan for a funeral. So she's paid somebody, and when she dies, there will be, because I know she wants to be cremated, all of that is paid for. Everything is sorted, and she's got a little list of where I can find that person, I can contact that person.
And it must be such a relief.
It is a huge relief.
Really? I mean,
because she's remote, and when I get there, I'm going to have to hit the ground running if anything happens to my mom, God forbid.
Correct. And the thing is, Bridge, it's going to happen.
And so when I go back to asking for help, I know that in England, even though some of the systems people are potentially saying are perceived to be crumbling a little bit, and there is a lack of access to doctors, etc., etc. But I think that my mother has access to more support that is provided by the state than, for example, your folks who are in South Africa. So you would have to pay for a carer to come around a couple of times a week, and that would, I have no idea what that costs, but that would be incredibly,
all will be revealed. The one thing that I have found and that I will be looking at is an end-of-life doula.
So tell me a little bit more about that. I know you were interested in that.
Yeah, and I still am, because
in becoming an end-of-life doula.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and that is somebody who is non-medical, who basically comes in a non-medical, non-palliative way of guiding one through an end-of-life program or plan.
Process,
and whatever that looks like, through support, through conversation. And it's somebody that can also look after your affairs when you can't. And it's there for support. It's the emotional and caring support that one needs, that can be offered outside of the family when sometimes the family is not there. But also you can navigate conversations because you're not the family.
Yes, so you have an objective view of what's going
Correct.
on. And you're not interested in who inherits the vase, for example.
100%.
Yeah.
So that's something that I will be exploring as well, and there might be a part 2 to this.
So I guess we're familiar with a doula because that's how we begin our lives. Most of us are aware of the term that a doula helps women
100%.
birth, and so an end of life doula helps people
Navigate.
progress on that journey towards death, and potentially making it a more elegant thing.
Yeah, and sometimes I think it might be a way forward purely because, as you rightly said, they're more objective. And can navigate between, the family and the person who is end of life.
And I know that it's exhausting, but I guess it's also something that we have to look at as a privilege, that we are able to care for our parents. And sometimes the challenges...
I suppose you have to define the word care for your parents, in my mind.
So taking you and I out of the equation... People have relationships with their parents, and parents can be very frustrating. And I can see how frustrating I am to little Miss 14. She doesn't yet have the capacity to understand the full privilege of having a household that has a mom and dad in it, and so she doesn't really understand the level of care that she gets because she gets 14. It. She's 14, and
she shouldn't have to.
Exactly. The level of care we give back up the sandwich is a privilege to us in that you can support your parents. I can support my mom. If she needs... So I speak to my mom on the daily.
Sure.
Even though we're 12 hours apart. And sometimes she really just wants to tell me what was on TV. And that's okay by me. I can sit and listen to that. The perspective that I have is that my mom will not be there for as long as I thought that she would. And so that's what I'm facing.
Sure, that makes me feel quite sad.
It makes me, it's devastating to consider. It's devastating to think that I won't hear her voice on WhatsApp and hear her stories about going to the shop and buying something on special.
Sure. Yeah, that's just sucker punch me.
Yeah. These, and that's.
I suppose that's also the power of recording the stories.
Yeah. So two things. Now that I'm trying to collect myself, two things. Number one, it's a privilege that I get to walk this journey with her, because our parents are such incredible souls. They've had so much that they've had to deal with. My mom was born just after the war,
My folks.
as your parents were. And I guess a lot of our generation have come through, some shit, man.
Yeah, they've come through some shit, Bridge.
Yeah.
And
so that's why I go back to it's a privilege. I thank God for her every day. I really do.
For my mom and dad.
Exactly.
I really do.
And so that's what
frustrating as they are.
But it doesn't matter. And that's what you need to go home with.
Yeah.
Mom and Dad, I'm here. I'm your son, and it's an absolute privilege to be of service to you.
I think the hardest thing, Bridge, is the fact that I'm going to go back now. I'm probably going to say goodbye to them. Like, I don't know when I'll see them again.
Okay, but that we don't know that right now.
No, we don't.
And we'll navigate that at the time.
It is a privilege. It is a privilege and an honour to be a parent and to have been parented. And that's stating the obvious, isn't it? But you do put things into perspective of I cherish the moments now, and I've let go. I've been able to let go a lot of anger and resentment towards my parents for not doing what I've asked them to do, for the pure fact that
it's not their map of the world.
Correct.
That's not how they manage themselves.
We're all on our own journey.
We are.
So I've come through, and I'm going to pat myself on the back and say I've learnt a lot about myself through this role as stepping up, moving, between these different sandwich layers. Thank you for that.
That leads me to another point, and it's something that we've talked about before, but we haven't really acted upon it. I think that there's enormous value in capturing somebody's story. And I can take that back to a personal experience when I knew that my grandmother was dying. And suddenly it was so important for me to know some of her story.
Right.
She was one of 13 children in pre-war Holland. It was tough growing up. Her mother was not present. Her father couldn't keep hold of these 13 renegade children. They were taken away from him. She was taken to an orphanage as early as 3 years old. And one of her memories is wetting her bed at the age of 3 and being put on the street in her wet-soaked, urine-soaked nightgown in the middle of winter to be made fun of by the passers-by, so that you will learn not to wet the bed again.
Could you imagine that happening today?
Oh, absolutely not. I can't imagine it happening back then, but it did.
It did, yeah. I mean, I have a similar story with my mom going to a convent and also being
he's put on a train at 6 years old.
6 years old, and then she was late for class, so she got cuts with the metal ruler across her hand, and then methylated spirits put on it to try and heal it. And the stories are just like
incomprehensible.
Incomprehensible. I mean, but yes.
So capturing those stories, and it became really important for me to and so I made notes. Who were her brothers and sisters?
Sorry, Rich, how was these recorded?
I made notes out of everything. Yes.
Did you ask your mom or did you ask your grandmother?
I actually sat with my grandmother and we had a conversation. And it started off with, tell me how to make.
How old were you?
Must have been early 20s.
Okay.
And her story became really important to me because I was so afraid of losing that link with her. My grandparents were really important to my life. They helped raise me. They were there when some instability kind of shook our family home a little bit. And so getting her recipe for the Dutch butter cookies and the recipe for
Boterkoek.
Yes, for the Dutch butter cake and some of the other things that she got. Yeah, and I wish I could have recorded it on video. I would love to, because now I only see her in my dreams occasionally, and the memory is a little bit faint.
I think we're definitely...
And sometimes I smell her cigarettes, actually.
Yeah. I mean, my granddad lived with us for many years. He was very English, and he lived with us when I was sort of a teenager. mid-teens, and my dad and him didn't necessarily get along. And I saw the struggles between, you talk about the sandwich, I saw the struggles between, as a child, watching my parents navigate their parents.
I want to stop you there. What was the role that your mother played in that? As the sandwich, as the meat in that sandwich? What lesson did you learn there?
That it was very difficult for her because she had to be the go-between and try and placate my dad and then placate grandpa, and it could not have been easy. And I suppose that's influenced my view on having parents live with you, because I think it's a massive responsibility, one that is necessary because you are a child. But sure, it was. I mean, I loved my grandfather, and we used to have the most wonderful conversations. And he was as batty as hell, and smoked a pack of cigarettes a day, drank a bottle of whiskey.
Not a day.
Not a day, but he was just, he was fascinating. And, I don't have a sense of smell, but you mentioned you can smell the cigarettes of your grandmother. I can smell the cigarettes, even though I don't know what the hell they smell like. But yeah,
it's a thing, and that was very prevalent when my grandmother died. I could smell them often.
Yeah.
And there was neither of our neighbours smoked. There was nobody walking past the street who smoked. It was very definitely her presence was there, and it's just a soothing thing to have something. So wouldn't it be amazing to be able to record those stories for people?
Hell yes.
Yeah.
Hell yes.
So maybe that is something that we should talk about and explore a little bit further.
Well, I'm going, it's one of my missions is to get some of those stories, and I'd like Miss 14 to be present, to listen to those stories. And yeah, I mean,
because we can do that ourselves. If we're in a situation, anybody who's in that situation, you've got an iPhone, it works perfectly.
Voice memo.
Or voice memos.
Just voice memo.
Absolutely. But if you want the privilege of seeing your parent, put the camera somewhere where they can't necessarily, where they eventually forget that it's there, and then just have these conversations. But it does mean that you have to be open and you have to be vulnerable.
Correct.
And sometimes as children, we forget to show our vulnerability and our interest in our parents' stories because we're busy living our own lives. Yeah. And that's a generational thing.
It's to make the time and do it. And
it's to make the time.
Before it runs out.
Well, that's key, before it runs out. What's one piece of wisdom you reckon you've gained from your parents that you would like to impart on our precious daughter?
Two things come to mind straight away. Is from my father is just always be there. Just be there. You might not understand what's going on in the world, but to have Kenzie's back and to always be there for her. And from my mom is to have an open heart and give. She's just so giving. She's the most open-hearted, giving person I have ever met in my life. And she imparted all her knowledge as much as she could onto me to be the best man that I could possibly be for my wife, sitting across the table here, and for my daughter. And for that, I love her eternally. She's, everyone's mom is the best in the world.
Of course, but your mom was a nurse, so it was very much part of her nature to give everything of herself. Which
she was. She's taken nothing for herself. I mean, she doesn't have very much now because she's given it all away, or she's always been there for others. And I suppose that also adds, a little bit to the guilt of I wish I could do more, but I'm doing as much as I can with what I've got. So those are the two things that I've taken away. There's a lot more, but in a nutshell, those are the two things. And for yourself?
Wow, I don't know if I could sum up all the lessons.
No, I get that. But if you could give us maybe just three of them.
My mom has been an eternal seeker of wisdom, and that is one thing that I hope I always am. The other lesson that my mom has always taught me is it doesn't matter if the person is sweeping the floor or running the business, they deserve equal respect and kindness from me.
It's been one of the biggest lessons your mother has taught me, and her openness to, doesn't matter who you are, to seeing the human being and the person opposite you is the biggest lesson that I've learned from your mom. Is just see them as a human being. And I love her for that because I've learned a lot.
Something comes to mind actually, and it's an experience that she related. When we worked at IBM in Johannesburg, I was also working there, so Mum and I would go in and come home together. And there was a beggar who used to stand at the exit to the garage that we used to drive out. And he was just the most vile thing. And it's terrible to say that, but because I was so prejudiced at the time and so fearful of him, I just well, I don't know if it was a male or a female, to be honest, but just covered in rags and blisters and the stench. You had to wind up your window just to get past this poor creature. And my mom was on her own once, and so there was a traffic light that you had to wait for before you could exit the garage, and she was at the traffic light, and he or her was standing on her side, and she said the two of them made eye contact, and she said everything just fell away for her, and she just saw such a wounded soul stuck inside there. She didn't see the rags or the blistering sores or the stench or anything. And all she was able to do was just literally just send love. And yeah, I guess that's a real lesson. It doesn't matter what you're wrapped up in. You know, a monkey in drag is a monkey no less, says Rodriguez.
Ram Dass said it so succinctly that we are all walking each other home. I'm paraphrasing.
Correct, we are. Yeah.
We are all walking each other home.
Yeah.
None of us get out of this alive.
No. And it doesn't matter what you look like. It doesn't matter what you accumulate. It doesn't matter. None of those worldly material possessions matter. Really, it's just the legacy that you leave for your friends and family. Yeah.
And I love you for the lessons that you've taught me. So thank you.
They are mine to give, Louis. May you always be a willing student.
May I please go and get a sandwich now?
Yes, okay, you can have a sandwich.
Thank you for that, Bridge.
Sweet, thank you too. Nice job, Louis.
Can I ask you a question?
The Bolton Ink Effect.